here today. I think I'm going to read the first paragraph of my novel just because I'm off on a book tour. So, got to celebrate the book. And I'm afraid to read it with the cover on it because I'll accidentally give it away. So, it's funny, I've been in places where I accidentally left my book lying there, the one that was all marked up with my notes, and then they sell it at the bookstore. And not knowing it's the one I marked up. So, I'm going to read just the first paragraph to give you a feel of it. It's a little different. It's a little bit more mystical than my other writing, and it's because I'm old and life seems more mysterious than ever. You know, you think, some of you are old enough to know, you think it's good. Yeah, I'm looking at you. Hey, we're in it together. Because you think you're going to figure things out, but instead, everything becomes more mysterious, you know? And if you're lucky, more beautiful, you know? But certainly more mysterious. And my book has a map in it. Is that not cool? And my friend made it, which is even cooler. So I'll read the first paragraph. Chapter 0, which is what I call my prologue. Because there's like a math thing. Not too much. Not enough to hurt. This is called The Town Has a Troubled Soul. Once upon a time, Masaga Island was the place where desperate mothers abandoned baby girls, and where young women went seeking to prevent babies altogether. But in living memory, Rose Cottage on the island was the home of the herbalist, Hermine herself, Zook, who raised her 3 daughters there. The oldest, a lawyer named Primrose, was the most accomplished. The middle daughter, Mary Rose, called Molly, a nurse, was the most practical. And the youngest, Rose Thorn, was lazy and beautiful. Hermine's medicines, her tinctures, salves, and waters, are now discredited in the light of day, but at night the people of White Heart, Michigan, still use them if some tidy housekeeper or other busybody hasn't tossed away the unlabeled jars and bottles. Only tiny amounts of these fixes are required, as they have become more effective with time. Sometimes just unstoppering a bottle is enough to release a cloud of soothing into an ailing household. The island and its women loom large in the dreams of local folks, who sometimes wake up sweating from visions of witches in black, though the island women never wore black, or of crows watchful in treetops, or of swamp streams bubbling up through the floorboards of their houses. It is said that the island, where healing waters percolate to the surface, was a place where women shared one another's dreams, a place where women did what they wanted. So it's funny, like I worked really hard on this book to make it like super realistic, to make it like gritty, with lots of gritty details about what exactly happens in the country, and you know what the feel of the soil. And then it turned out I wrote a fairy tale about a witch who lives on an island, and she has 3 daughters, and the youngest is lazy, and so the youngest is lazy and foolish, and so therefore she will save them all. You know, isn't that the story of the fairy tale? Like there's 3 brothers usually, and the youngest brother's a fool, and he saves them. So somehow I thought I was writing something gritty and contemporary, and then like this old fairy tale rose up out of it. So the story hopefully works on both those levels. I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to read. Okay, I became very interested in an incident in my hometown about a tow truck driver who was beaten up by some kids who did meth, and they wanted his money. And I don't know if you know any people like this. They don't trust banks. They keep all their money in like a hole in the chimney or in a hole in the ground or something. So he was that kind of guy, and some people beat him up really bad. And I became obsessed with this story. I'm not sure why. I think maybe because it was a story of resurrection, because he didn't die. Everyone thought he would die, and he didn't. But I just became very obsessed with the whole story. And obsession is a very good thing for a writer, to the ability to become obsessed by something in the outside world, because it allows you to stay with the story long enough to, to get it right. So I actually wrote a nonfiction piece. So some of you are, is anybody in here primarily an essay writer? You prefer essays and memoirs? Yeah, so you like to tell the truth, And so I wrote the true story as well as I could. It took me a long time. I had to do a lot of research. I listened to court tapes. I had to spend a lot of time with the tow truck driver after he recovered. And so that was a great experience. But I found there was more to tell. I wanted to write a fictionalized version of the story because I felt there were like larger truths that I could get at if I fictionalized it. And so I'm going to read you both of those versions. And then when I was done, I'm just going to read you pieces of them so you'll get the feeling of them. And then I was done with that, I found there were like certain aspects of it that I still had no story, okay? And notice how this feels. I hope that there's a certain urgency, even though it happened a few years ago. I hope there's a certain urgency to it because everything I'm telling you now is true. What I'm telling you really happened to somebody. And when you came upon the essay, you would know that, oh, this is a story that really happened. So it has that sort of importance, an importance of what actually happens in the world, which is going to be different than what the fictional story has. On a Saturday night, October 19th, 2002, Henry Lanning and Chad Van Dusen, each 6 foot tall and over 230 pounds, pulled into Don York's driveway in a borrowed GMC Jimmy. They had an iron pipe and a roll of duct tape and gloves. Lanning got out and approached the house while Van Dusen stayed in the vehicle. York had heard the neighbor's dog barking, so he opened the upstairs window and turned on the outside light. Lanning shouted up that he needed a jump for his vehicle. So Don York's a tow truck driver. So he needed a jump for his vehicle parked down the road. York, who is a trim man, 5'8", with shoulder-length white hair, did not know Lanning. But when he saw the guy was wearing brand new gloves anyway with 4 cartridges, that night and the next few nights he slept with a shotgun in his bedroom. Chad Van Dusen was Don York's ex-wife's nephew. And Van Dusen had met Henry Lanning a few days earlier at the home of a mutual friend, and both men were absconders from parole. In Van Dusen's words, they both needed to hit a lick, which was to say they needed to make some money fast. However, the men gave up on York that night and went home, according to Van Dusen, who later pled guilty to conspiracy to commit armed robbery. According to the prosecution and key witnesses, Lanning returned alone 3 nights later with some rope and a busted-off tree branch the length and thickness of a baseball bat. Rolls of cash from which he could peel off as many 20s, 50s, 100s as he needed. And he was rumored to keep his life savings in his house. Don York has always driven a tow truck, and for 25 years he's run his small junkyard just beyond the border of Comstock Township, where he grew up and almost graduated high school in 1967. At York's junkyard, you can buy tires, engines, radiators, starters, and alternators for American cars and trucks for less money than you can get them anywhere else. Before he owned the salvage yard, he used to part out cars in his backyard. On the following Tuesday night, October 22nd, at about 8 o'clock, York pulled in the driveway, shone his bright lights on his front door so he could see to unlock it. He turned off his alarm that went back out to his wrecker to get the pizza he had picked up for dinner. The next thing he remembers is waking up in the hospital 3 weeks later. Okay, so this is a real reporting. It almost feels like reporting, but it's a long essay, and it feels later on it feels a little less like reportage, but it goes into
Don York's experience and into the court case and what happened and the puzzling out of why Don York is who he is and what these crimes meant. So it's a pretty long essay, like 20 pages. But you can see it has this sort of feeling to it of telling the truth. Okay, so I'm going to read, and I should tell you that just out of respect for Don York, who's still a living person in my community, I shared this with him. He suffered mental deficits since this attack. I mean, he was in a coma for 3 weeks, and he has suffered mental deficits. And when I spoke with him, he had a lot of difficulty speaking. And for instance, he couldn't say the word 10 for some reason, but he learned how to say 2 5s. There's 2 5. If there's crows in the tree, there's 2 5s, crows in the trees, instead of there's 10 crows in the trees. So there was a lot, really, of interpersonal stuff to get through. Now, this is it, but I was also very interested in why the person committed this crime. And so I spent a lot of time with these court tapes. And so when I told this story in a fictional version, I start out telling the story from the point of view of the criminal, okay, which is something I could not do that in a nonfiction piece. And we can talk about why that's the case. So I'm just going to read the beginning of it. Okay, and the fictionalized story is called King Cole's American Salvage. The title of the essay was called Crimes Against a Record Driver. Because we call him a tow truck driver, he always called himself a record driver, which I thought had a nice sound to it. King Cole's American Salvage. On a windy evening in February, William Slocum Jr., 11 months out of prison, pulled into King Cole's driveway in a Jeep he'd just stolen from an apartment complex near his girlfriend's house. He cut through the Jeep's canvas top with a utility knife, popped the ignition with his screwdriver, and hot-wired the engine, a trick William Slocum Sr. had taught him not long before passing out drunk on the railroad tracks. Slocum's car had broken down 2 days ago, and King Cole of King Cole's American Salvage had given him $70 for it, minimum scrap price. That old Mitsubishi Montero hadn't been registered or insured, so if he'd left it broken down on the road, the city of Kalamazoo would have impounded it. But still, Slocum felt Cole had ripped him off, had not given him what the car was worth. Slocum and his girlfriend Wanda were now without any car, since hers had been repossessed 2 months ago. She also hadn't managed to pay her mortgage, or even get enough methamphetamine to keep herself going, since she lost her last job. And Slocum hadn't been getting any work either, so things were tight. He tried to make love with Wanda last night, but without the meth, it wasn't working. And he knew tonight he needed to hit a lick. If he didn't, Wanda was bound to lose faith in him. Slocum got out of the Jeep, carrying with him a length of galvanized pipe he'd swiped from Parker's Auto Repair, where he bought meth sometimes, and where he met Johnny Cole, King Cole's nephew. They'd known each other less than 2 weeks, but right off, Slocum knew Johnny was a solid guy. Although he was 5 years younger than Slocum and still pocked with acne, Johnny was generous with the homegrown and seemed like the kind of person you could trust, a rare quality. Slocum had liked the way the kid had asked his advice, had seemed to look up to him. Slocum knocked hard on King Cole's ornate wood and wrought iron front door, and in about a minute, King swung open an upstairs casement window and turned on the security light, which lit up the crusted snow. Slocum could see by the tire tracks that the tow truck was the only vehicle that had been there recently. According to Johnny, the man's wife had died years ago. According to the sticker on the window, Cole had an alarm system. "What do you want?" King said through the screen. The small man stood with one hand on his pot belly. His long beard and shoulder-length hair were black. Johnny had told him the old man dyed it because he thought it made him attractive to the ladies. I need a jump start, or maybe a tow, Slocum said. I don't work at night, Cole said. Call somebody else. Cole started to close the window. But I'm a friend of Johnny's, Slocum said quickly and backed up so King could see him better. Your nephew Johnny. You scrapped my old car the other day, the blue Mitsubishi. Cole opened the window again. That Jap crap isn't worth a shit. That's what you said, Slocum said. Slocum had stayed up late smoking and drinking beer with Johnny a few nights ago. And when Johnny was stoned, he told Slocum what a cheap bastard King Cole was, how Johnny worked his ass off for his uncle. But the man wouldn't lend Johnny enough money to buy some old diesel truck he wanted. King Cole didn't like banks, Johnny had said, and he carried a shitload of money on him, thousands of dollars in hidden pockets in his jacket. I should go out to his house late some night and negotiate my own loan, Johnny had said, and they both laughed. So I think it has a different feel to it in each situation. And what I don't have going for me in the fiction, I don't have your confidence that this is really true. So I have to get something else. I have to ask you to believe in the vision that I'm showing you, that it's going to take you somewhere. So I think the project of writing fiction, for me anyway, the project of writing fiction and nonfiction are very different. It requires a different kind of writing from me. I notice that I write longer sentences in my fiction. I spin maybe a more complete vision because I know I have to paint something for you rather than having you automatically invested because someone in the real world had an experience. Now, I'm still interested in Don York's story, but I ended up writing a few poems because I spent a lot of time in the junkyard. And one thing that really moved me, well, first I'll read a poem that I sort of got from the general situation that I experienced. This is called Lake and Olmsted, which is the street corner in my neighborhood where the junkyard is. Lake and Olmsted. Everybody rises up again in this place, like a bunch of stone-hungry phoenixes with acne and ringworm and knuckle tattoos. The rapist gets out of jail with a boner for their liquor store clerk. Nobody pays child support, and abortions don't take. Fetuses cling to wombs like barnacles to boat bottoms. The boys who cook meth bash open the head of our tow truck driver, leaving him in the snow to die, and he lies there for a day moaning at first, and then a long time silent. But he rises up again to drive his truck, to tow the uninsured cars and coke whores and scrap metal thieves. We build a shrine to him in the bloody snow, where his brains leak out. Only a few of us rob him now. It's kind of real. I should have thought twice before saying that out loud. Okay, and the other thing that really moved me is that there was a Don York was the driver, and there was one other employee in the junkyard, and it was his cousin. And I watched several times as this man tore apart a car with his bare hands. I mean, it was really, maybe not bare, he had gloves on, but it was really something to see. Like, it was in the cold winter, and he pulled the car up using the tow truck. They pulled the car up, so pulling up by that chain. And the car was up so you could see its underbelly. And he, piece by piece, took off all the valuable pieces that he could scrap out. The catalytic converter and, all the wiring that he could take out. And there's something so moving about seeing a person, his skin is so vulnerable looking, doing this rough work And so I wrote this poem. This is called Winter Song in the Salvage Yard. The snow-covered Lincoln shivers beneath your propane torch. Imagine this junkyard in flames, oiled hot enough to melt ice and tires, hot enough to turn platinum to gold. Only one naked lady in the place, a cartoon from 1964. Whiskey and brake fluid thaw frozen blood, lubricate the hard pumping heart. A skinny kid offers you a tenner for a Holly carburetor. Your voice carries over the noise of the tire machine. Son, you ain't getting it for less than 20. Oh, save me from grease and steel, you sing, as you hoist the Lincoln aloft, reveal its belly, and climb on under, singing, Lord, give me this catalytic converter. Don't let this beast fall and crush me. Let me yank this bastard starter as cold as the pump handle, singing, don't let me die before I'm old, as you knock off those icy tires with a sledgehammer swung like a sword. Oh, Lord, break free these stainless steel lines, and don't let a beautiful woman walk through that gate to shake me up. Don't send me an angel. Don't carry me away. So like just having the joy of staying with material that really interested me, and real life characters that I could then work with and fictionalize and follow and enjoy and appreciate. These are people who are not appreciated by many people. I mean, you call the guy to tow your truck, you're not usually thinking about him. But to really invest in any human situation and human interaction is really rewarding. And you know exactly what I mean. The times that you've had a little extra time to spend indulging in a new situation, and to me it was such a privilege to be able to do that. So we have any questions?
I know some people have class that's so. I don't know if you're on starting marriage, and probably that's most people like people want to know better. But what I'm curious is, what was the moment where you realized you could make this something that you were actually doing rather than just stopping?
Yeah, I mean, there's many points along the way where this happens. And I'll tell you, most writers can't make a living at it. I tried to write in college. I was told I was not a good writer in college. So I said, I'll give this up. Then I got out of college and I found myself writing again. So I tried to write. And then I would send my stories out. And I was told, not good enough. As anybody who sends out work knows. So I tried to give it up again. So then I studied mathematics. And I was going to get a PhD in mathematics. And then right before I committed entirely, I actually got my master's in mathematics. I said, I need to try. I love it so much, I need to try it once more. And I took a course, the first time I really took a good course. And the teacher told me, you're good at this, and you're getting better at this, is what she said. You're getting good at this. She didn't say you're good. You're getting good at this. This is something you could pursue and maybe make a go of it. Now, I was not confident because I held on to that mathematics, because I said, I need to make a living. I mean, I come from people who are poor. So I know better than to think. Community colleges are good at helping you figure out a backup plan. So just talk to your teachers and just know that you love the writing. It's the desire to keep, and you don't have to love every minute of the writing. You can hate plenty of moments of the writing because it really is hard and frustrating. So, but it really is not about giftedness. That's the worst one. Talent is the second worst. So. Mm-hmm.
I love the defamiliarization that these kind of stories bring, where you find just a topic related to something that might seem mundane to the average reader. So a tow truck driver, people in urban cities, they don't care about these people. They care about the story. It's not something that they would care about within their own life. They don't care about their normal tow truck driver because there's not a sense of community within that. So where do you kind of find these sort of community-driven stories that others might not try to look for, I suppose?
Yeah, well, it's funny because I didn't know that I was going to be a community person in the very community I grew up in. Because my idea was to get the heck out of town. Get out of high school, go as far away as I could, like completely with no idea what that meant. You know, I was really not, I mean, I just left. I left. I went to California. I was like, I'll go to school in California. I had no clue what I was doing. I was like a girl alone with nothing on campus. I was insane. But anyway, so I went off and I lived a lot of places and I got by somehow, didn't die when I was hitchhiking somehow. I joined the circus, I did all these crazy things. I rode my bike from across the country and didn't get killed by the guys in the pickup. And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of interesting. Those are my people. They're scrappy, they're industrious, poor, they make do, and they're funny, you know, and they're fun. And, you know, they supported, you know, my mom supported me as an adventurer, and I'm like, what's up with these people? And I took a new interest in my own people. And then I married a guy from Boston, and somehow we ended up back up. Well, he wanted a parking spot, and they don't have those in Boston. So, and a pole barn. So they don't have those either in Boston. So we moved back to Kalamazoo, and it was, having been away helped me see my own people in a new way. And then I had the luxury of already being hooked into a community of all kinds of people. Because when you grow up if you're in a working class community, you can't afford to just have services and pick them out of the book. You have to have things done by somebody who knows somebody, and your friend's uncle does this. You need asbestos removed. If you remove it at all, you don't do it yourself, which is not a good idea. But you know somebody who knows somebody who does this, and so you end up, everything becomes more personal in a community like this. So that was a luxury. I thought it was bad to be poor. Then I realized as a writer, actually that was a luxury. Everything had the human element in it. And everything was worth exploring. And I heard everybody's stories. And so I'm a worrier by nature. I worry about other people. And so I would find the things I was worried about. The very things I was worried about would be the things I could write about. Because I'd lain awake worrying about things, and I thought about them, I talked to people about it, I talked to my mom, I talked to my husband, and oh, poor Jim Coe, he's in jail again. How'd he end up? Oh, he's such a knucklehead, you know. And, you know, so all this like worrying and conversation, that helped me very much. But also just finding a way to take an interest, you know. It's very easy to sort of, you know, I'm busy with my own things, and put these people off to the side, but like try to include the community. You know, whenever you can, like take an interest in a story you might not have taken an interest in. Kind of just open up the can. What's in there? What are these people? What are their lives like? You know, and those of you, a bunch of you already do this. But stick with it. Yeah.
What advice do you wish that you were given as a new writer? And this would be anything.
Well, that business about you don't have to be talented, you don't have to be gifted. What I really didn't know is that it really was about hard work. I wasn't told that. I thought people were talented writers, or they weren't. And I was smart enough to know I wasn't as a young person. So that's why I kept trying to give it up. I had no idea. You just keep working at it. And so that really is my advice. And also, this is advice I give my graduate students, and they get mad at me. If you want to write, it's going to take you a while to get going. It's just going to take a lot of time. You're going to have a lot of bad drafts. You're going to have to find friends you can work with. You're going to have to find resources. And here's the thing, you're going to be poor for a while. Unless you have a trust fund, which I advise.